Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode. And in this episode, we'll learn some interesting thing by creating some multi-tenant application, and we'll deploy this application to a BTP. So to start with, I believe we can take certain base application as a scratch. So this is one of the application I created a long back on authenticating some Node.js application. So this application, this is a GitHub repository. I will share the details in the description box. So I just made a little bit of adjustment to make this application a little bit, ready for our exercise or kind of a POC. This is one. I'll give the description box, and you can definitely try it out. Okay. So to start with, I'll just give a quick idea like what this multi-tenant application is all about, right? So before we get into that multi-tenant application, let's understand what is a single tenant, right? Now in the single tenant application, we'll have, let's say, different tenants or some customers, okay? So this customer 1, this customer 2, and let's say this customer 3, right? And they will access the individual application instances, okay? And of course, these applications, resources, everything will be dedicated to that 3 different customers, okay? And of course, the application will be supported by the dedicated database. So this is what kind of a single tenant. So that means the physical resources as well as the application instances all are clearly segregated and separate from each other, right? So one customer's data which is stored over here by this application instance definitely will not be accessible by the other customer. So it's a clearly separated kind of an arrangement. That's called a single tenant. Whereas in multi-tenant kind of an architecture, how it works, like the same way I can have multiple different customers, right? And they will eventually access a single application instance. And this will be created obviously by the provider, software provider, right? And now, obviously, that application will also have one single database, okay? And individual customers will actually access this application instance. Now, the interesting fact would be the physical resources are shared across the different customers or different tenants, but the database as it's same, so the data has to be separated logically. Otherwise, it will be a data leakage and kind of a data privacy issue. So this is what we are going to do. So what we'll do, we'll first create some base application, right? So this base application will provide you a simple Node.js application, okay? Some Node.js app, and this application will deploy to BTP, okay? And BTP, so this BTP will be the sub account, and I'll call it as a provider sub account, okay? Provider sub account. And now the same application I'll access via different sub account on the same global account, right? So I can create multiple sub accounts under a global account, correct? So one of the global account, one of the sub account is, let's say, my trial instance, right? And I can create multiple other different sub accounts. Let's say sub account 1, sub account 2, like that, okay? So in trial, the problem is I cannot expose my Node.js application outside of this global account. I cannot expose it. So that means you cannot access my demo application from your sub account. Okay, over the internet you cannot subscribe it. So I have to have this model limited or restricted to my global account itself, just for demo purpose. But the concept will be all same. Now this sub account will be behaving as a tenant or kind of a customer. Okay, so it's a tenant 1 and tenant 2. So for the demo purpose, I'll be creating only one sub account, and from there, this application which I'll be deploying in my trial account, so I'll be able to subscribe and as well delete the subscription. Okay, these 2 things I'll give a demo, and we'll understand what are the things that is necessary, different configuration setup, and and dependencies. Of course, we'll learn a lot on that. So stick around till the end of this video, and definitely we'll learn something new out of. Okay, so let's get started with the Git cloning of this repository, and obviously I'll use the VS Code as the ID. let's get started by cloning this repository with the git clone command, and let's execute. And what will happen? It will start clone the different artifacts and put it under this folder called auth Node.js. All right, so now let's get into this folder called auth, and now we can actually inside the project. And what I need to do first, I have to download the different dependencies because I have package.json in two places. Shall be running npm install prefix. I think prefix not always works, so let's get into that folder, okay, dedicatedly called Approuter, and from there install npm command to install the dependencies, right? So this will do. Similar way, let's do cd the service folder and then npm install command. Okay, once the two dependencies are installed, okay, then we have to do something in the manifest.yml file. Okay, so manifest.yml file, what it does, it has this is a deployment descriptor, and you'll find these applications and the Approuter, two different models, and the dedicated route I have given, okay, like this. Now thing is, in your case, once you try out to access this kind of or maybe deploy it blindly just by downloading the way I'm showing, then you probably get into some trouble because it will complain this particular route being used in somewhere else. I'm not explaining what this is doing overall because that's a wastage of time. You probably can check out this particular video. I'll give the video in the description box also, and I have explained everything over there, that how this auth authentication works, etc. Okay, to save some time, I'm just focusing on the multi-tenancy. All right, so all dependencies are done, and now I have to deploy it to BTP. So before I deploy, the problem is it's the manifest.yml, right? It's not an mta.yml. So it's kind of a POC activity. So I have to explicitly create the dependencies over here. The dependencies service one is called XSUAA, and this particular service will take help from this file called xssecurity.json. Okay, it has certain roles and scopes. Okay, so that I'll use to create the XSUAA service instance first before I'll deploy. Otherwise, it will fail. So the command should be simple. First, you have to log into this folder. I can check if I'm already connected to something. Yes, I am. So you just have to log in, otherwise called cf login. Cloud Foundry create service XSUAA, and then plan is application. The name of this instance I'm giving as the MP list or employee list, and I'll use the folder called security xssecurity.json. This particular scope file I'll use to create the instance. Make sure that instance creation is complete. Okay, it may take little time to complete the task, though it will show as okay. Okay, but if you can check now with cfcs, only s, then it will give you the list of services, and you see that emp list successfully created, so you are good to go. So now I can simply run the command called cf push. What will happen? It will take this deployment descriptor and it will deploy both the applications called Approuter as well as the main application for the service index.js. These both applications will be deployed to BTP trial. All right, so if everything fine, then we'll find something called manifest applied. That means this is a valid manifest file, everything found, and it is good to go for creating the application. I'm just taking a pause over here, and I'll resume once the application is deployed. Okay, looks like the deployment is done and application in starting condition. So let's go to the BTP account, and indeed the applications are running. Now the thing is, it will not work because I have to assign the role to my user, right? So for that, I have to go to the trial, and then I have to go to the security user, and in this user, I'll just go to this role collection, and here I'll search for, or rather I'll click on assign role collection, and this is the employee read role collection that I just published through this deploy rather through this application deployment. I'll add this particular role, and then it's all assigned, and I'm good to test this application quickly. So what I'll do, I'll go there, and it's actually OAuth protected. That means the Approuter through I have to access the primary application. So let's get inside that, and I'll open it in a private window so that it prompts the authentication. All right, so now we are in the application. It's running up and running, but it's saying not found because it doesn't know the actual resource entity endpoint. So if I go to our application and go to xsapp.json, that will minimize, and will find this particular resource to be accessed within /emp, right? So let's do that. Just sorry, it will be over here /emp. Oh, my bad. It should be emp. Excellent. The dashboard is available. And now I can access something called get emp list. Yeah, the database access, which is actually a mock database I'm using over here. I'm not actually using any real database, some sort of a mock database or JSON format that the file I'm just accessing through this application. Sorry, here is my application. All right, so the application is working fine once it deployed to BTP, and the steps are prerequisite. So now the main work starts, means I have to make this application SaaS enabled. So let's see what are the specific steps that you have to follow. So let's jot it down first. Okay, to make this application SaaS enabled, right? So a couple of things I need to do. The first thing would be I have to use something called a SaaS registry. Okay, some sort of a service instance, SaaS registry. Okay, so this will help my application to be, I need to register my application under the SaaS registry, then only it will be able to expose to other sub accounts. Okay, but to create the SaaS registry, I need to make certain configurations for my applications, right? How it will be named when someone will search my application, what would be the name of this application, okay? And how to make this subscription and unsubscription, right? So what would be my real application URL, right? That we have to provide, or maybe any dependencies that my application needs. So those dependent resources, how to resolve. So those all sort of configurations I have to provide beforehand, okay? So that configuration file name is called config.json, okay? Fine. So now obviously, just like we did on XSUAA, right? User authentication and authorization. So for that we use xssecurity.json, correct? So that is the file I shown, xssecurity.json file. This is the configuration through which this service instance we created. Similarly, using this config.json, we'll be creating this SaaS registry. So that is the first thing, okay? Now third thing would be, once we put a configuration and create a SaaS registry, we have to make the subscription and let's say unsubscribe. So this kind of a mechanism or certain functionality, I would say, that we have to provide, right? Otherwise, how some customer will subscribe it, right? All right. So once this subscription, unsubscription, this feature is done, then of course we have to do certain additional configurations that I'll explain once I start making this SaaS enabling. But one important thing is you have to understand that when this application will be accessed, I have to provide a dedicated URL, okay? Some dedicated URL to be provided. Dedicated URL to access this app, okay? We call it dedicated URL, or you can call it a dedicated route that we have to provide, okay? Now with this dedicated route, okay, the main challenge would be that this XSUAA, right? This XSU is the main challenge, because when that tenant, that customer will try to access this application, again, that application should be prompting certain login credentials for that user. So obviously that login credentials, all details should be specific to that particular tenant, right? Or that particular customer. So these login credentials will be validating this particular tenant user, or I'd say that the customer details. It should not, it has nothing to do with the provider sub account, correct? It's nothing to do with the provider. So this is very important concept over here. You have to understand, otherwise it will not work. So this XSUAA needs to know which sub account through it will generate this token, or it will provide this login credential page. It has to know that beforehand. So for that, when we'll create this particular dedicated URL, or the route will provide that sub account details, okay? And we call it, let's say, many way you can create, certain uniquely you have to identify, and I'll provide subdomain details in our case, in our demo example. We'll create a specific subdomain for our sub account, okay? And that I'll use to understand that which subdomain through, or which sub account through, this particular credential page should be appearing. Now the problem is how a URL, from a URL, how that particular application know which is my subdomain, right? Because I can have multiple sub accounts, multiple tenants, right? And individual sub accounts will have their individual different details, a different subdomain name. So that's why there is one more important concept comes with some environment variables, okay? Environment variables. And that variable name is called tenant host pattern, right? So this is very, very important, super important, okay? That using that particular property of the environment variables, application will know, okay, which particular subdomain through, or which particular sub account through I have to authenticate the user. So this should basically contain some sort of a regex pattern, okay? And kind of a group wise pattern. You can put certain starting with the subdomain details, or maybe within certain application in between you can put that regex pattern through which it identifies, okay, if I find this kind of a pattern, then that means this is what my subdomain, okay? And that way it will identify which subdomain through the authentication will be triggered. I hope you got the concept. Definitely it will be more solidify once we create our application. And of course, to test it, we have to create a subdomain sub account, and that time we have to make sure that my subdomain name is basically recommended. That subdomain name should match with the org name, okay? So that will be easy for, it's a best practice, I would say, easy for to identifying the sub account details easily if we provide this kind of a name, kind of a unique mapping, okay? To start our journey, we'll first add certain additional roles, which is required for certain, tenant provisioning activities, like for SAP provisioning and tenant onboarding. So these roles, we just let it add in our access security, okay? And second thing, we'll come back to this redirect URL little later, but make sure there is a change pending. I'm not saving it, okay? Okay, next would be like the config.json, because through which we'll be creating the SAAS registry instance. So let's create that file config.json. So for that, we can simply go to auth folder and now touch config.json, okay? So it's created at the root level. Yeah, this is the file. So let's update this file now. All right. So here I'm adding up on subscription scenario. This would be my real application, backend application, because we have two kind of things, right? One is the Approuter, which will resolve the OAuth authentication, and this is the real application that will provide the data. Okay, so this API URL I'm just putting like this. You can put anything over here. Okay, but make sure the last one should be tenant ID. It's mandatory. Okay, otherwise you cannot subscribe your application. So of course, make sure you have this kind of a URL link ending with a tenant ID. And this is one, the display name means once the tenant will search for the application, they will look for this employee list MTA. Let's suppose you can put any name, of course. You can, hopefully you got the idea. And then now I have put the category as custom SAAS application. Okay, so let's save this file. I have still kept this access security unsaved. So once we do this config.thing, I'm pretty well to create the instance for SAAS registry. So you can put Cloud Foundry, create service, X SAAS -registry. Plan is application and name is SAAS registry EMP. Let's say this is the instance name I'm giving. And where to look for the configuration, of course, config.json. Okay, I'm creating a SAAS registry instance, and this instance will be applying in my manifest.yml to bind it out, to bind up this instance during deployment, because we have to again deploy these things, right? Okay, instance got created. So of course we'll be having two instances or service instance. One is what we created earlier, and now this is the one just now created. Okay, both are successful. Very good. So now this is the one. Let's bind it to our Approuter in the manifest.yml. So under this XSUAA, let's put SAAS registry EMP. Correct. So this is what I just bind it up. Let's save these changes also. Okay, so once we have these changes, what next? We have to write certain logic for the subscription and unsubscribe feature. So during subscription, what will happen? It will actually make a put request, and during unsubscribe, it will make a delete request. So that two things will write in our index.js to handle that out. Okay, so let's add this two logic over here. Let's put somewhere over here. Okay, so I put this one, put and the delete. So this is what the tenant ID will come as a parameter. That's why we have passed in the config.json. You can recall, I guess. And I'm basically taking the domain details for which that subscription been made, and it will generate a certain tenant URL, dedicated URL. Okay, and this URL will be a link to that application. Correct. So, and what I'm giving my tenant or kind of a subdomain details within the Approuter URL routing. Inside that, I'm just embedding that particular subdomain details. Okay, so this is what will be accessed from the tenant host pattern. So let's update tenant host pattern now from manifest.yml file. Under environment, you can put this field called tenant host pattern. That's all. And copy this enter line from this file. Let's copy this interline and put it over here. We'll make certain little change. So it will be Approuter this one. So this is the part I want to change it with certain regex pattern. So remove this one and put something like within a group. We have to put star, dot, and star. Okay, and this is the domain details, which is anyway needed. So this is my tenant host pattern, right? From this, it will pick the domain information against which the XSUAA login credentials will be validated. This is the reason it is so much important. All right, we are almost done. So let's come back to access security now, because once we get that application URL, then I'm expecting something over here, right? When it will generate. Generate means under index.js, we see the Approuter name gets changed by embedding some domain information, correct? So when it is from the provider sub account, then this domain information will not be required, right? But when it is a sub account from the tenant side, different tenant side, then this will be changing. That's why under access security, over here, let's put certain wildcard character. That way, if anything comes, it knows this is my actual Approuter path or redirect URL after the login credentials is validated, right? Then it needs certain redirect URL where it will access the application. Just now I recall, okay, the access security, once I initially created, so that's a dedicated one I put. It has to be, or it must be shared, because this particular XSUAA, once I share, then only from a different sub account, the same particular XSUAA configurations can be accessed or can be shared, I would say. So it's a very big mistake I did. Make sure you don't do that. Okay. In the manifest.yml, I added this SAAS registry to my Approuter. That is a bad one. I should have added this one to my primary application, not the Approuter. So now what I'll do say push command. So it will now bind to the right place, because now I have added this one to the primary application. I'll take a pause, and once it's done, we'll do this re-registration. I'll see how it works. So it looks like the cloud deployment is complete. We'll go to our account, and what we'll do, we'll go back to our main account, and now we have to go for a subscription, right? So that means we need to create one more sub account. So create a sub account, and you see this is the parent. So I'll copy this parent name, right? And I'll put the display name is like that, and it offers certain name like this, but I don't want to take it. I put this name as called tenant 1. Okay, anything you can give. I'm giving this one, and display name also same. So this is my subdomain name. Okay, and I think if I create it, let's see. Yeah, this gets created. So let's get inside first. It will take little time. Again, I'm taking a pause. So creation is over. So let's get inside this sub account, and you will notice that this is the subdomain created, but it has to have the Cloud Foundry enablement also has to be done. So I'm doing a Cloud Foundry enablement, and now it's giving some suggestion for the org name. What I'll do, I'll remove this extra thing, right? And this one will be my org name again. So everything I put like this. Okay, so now click on create. Then my org name and my subdomain should match. Okay, this is what I told initially. So this is what I'm doing. All right, so once the cloud enablement is done, then what we can do, we can go to instance and subscription, and now we can go for create instance, and you can see from here that employee list MTA. Awesome, this application is now available over here. Where from this employee list MTA coming? I hope you can recall. This all coming from this config.json. You see, this is the name coming from. Okay, excellent. So now what I'll do, you can also search like this. Go to service instance, service marketplace, and here also you can see the custom SaaS applications is showing. Excellent, right? So click on that, click on create. Just like we subscribe some standard SAP software, similar like things we are also doing as a custom way. So this is the default plan, and click on create, and it will give you the option to go to your subscription details. It will take us to this page. Voila, the subscription is done. Perfect. So now go to this application and end up with an error. It is saying this particular route, you can see the route. So this is our Approuter list, and this is what the domain, right? So 5D trial tenant one. This is the subdomain with which this the Approuter link gets rebuilt for this tenant specific application to access. But this particular route is missing, and it doesn't know how to get that URL. Where is that mapping? The mapping is not done. So as it is a POC, so we'll create this route manually in our provider account for individual sub account, right? Just for testing. But in a real app life, this should not be created like that. There will be one service instance called custom domain service. Okay, that has to be used to create an instance, and using that, it will be automatically that mapping will happen. Okay. So we'll not create this kind of manually this routing for individual sub account, but for our BTP trial, we should do it to make it work. And we'll create using the CLI command, and you can see CF map route. This is the Approuter application. We are creating first of all a domain, right? And this is the host name for the application, and binding with this subdomain name. That way we will create a dedicated route for that. And where this route will be stored, for that we'll go to our provider account once again, and we'll see the Approuter over here in the trial, and then go to the dev space, and there you will see this routes. Okay, and currently you have the routes for the backend application and the Approuter. These two routes gets created, right? And now if I run this one command, then it will create one more route. Okay, and once the route is successfully done, you see the mapping is also done for this application. So you can go there, you'll go for a refresh, and you'll find probably one more route generated. You see the Approuter now got created perfectly. Okay, so the route is now generated. So let's go to our sub account, which we just created, the tenant account. And from there, let's access on the EMP. It is coming a dashboard because it doesn't need an authentication. This route is not required to, it's not actually protected. But the moment we'll put get EMP list, it gives a forbidden. Okay, makes sense. So what I'll do, we'll go to the security user, and in this user under the subdomain tenant one, we'll go to that and maximize it, go to role collection, assign role collection, and select this and click on assign role collection. That's all. Once you add it, go back to our instance, and this time we will try to access it in a private window. And now put the password. Yeah, now the credentials are done. So let's put EMP and then get EMP list. Excellent. We are able to access from the tenant application by doing a subscription. I hope you learned something out of this video. If you want to know more about SAP and BTP related thing, don't forget to subscribe my channel. See you soon in our next video. Till then, goodbye.